you say you are again? Sorry.
Councillor Stephen Doyle, Tamworth Waste Management.
Thank you, Stephen. Welcome. Okay, right. Minutes of the previous meeting held on the 11th of July are attached page 124. I don't think there's anything on there that is not on the agenda today, but has anybody got any matters arising from those? Not seeing any. Okay, so can we agree those as a correct record of the meeting on the 11th of July from those that were here? That's me anyway, so okay. Item 4 is a paper that's been brought to us following the last meeting, where I was tasked with investigating ways of possibly bringing the two boards together. For those that aren't aware of the Staffordshire Sustainability Board, that's going to meet directly after this meeting. There's a paper here which has been put together by Clive Thompson, which has checked out the idea of joining the two groups together for better management of meetings, because we do have the same people coming to both meetings, and also because joint waste management issues, the management of waste across the county, is one of the priorities of the Sustainability Board. So I think just quickly going through the report, thank you, Clive, for putting that together for us. We checked whether it was legally possible, with obviously the Joint Waste Management Board being under what was called the Staffordshire Local Government Association. We've checked that out, and that doesn't actually mean anything. Also, the fact that the officer group that sits under the board, the proposal is that continues to sit to provide the focus on waste management issues. And of course, there is an officer group that sits under the Sustainability Board, which will also meet with those officers for that agenda too. So I think going forward, if we were to bring the two groups together, there'll be one meeting, of course, with two parts of the agenda: Joint Waste Management agenda, and then the Sustainability Board agenda. And of course, the officer groups would feed in. I think last point to make is that both of the boards we're talking about today aren't decision-making bodies. They do refer either to the cabinets, or in the case of Joint Waste Management Board, up to the leaders and chief executives, or the leaders board as it is now. So that structure has been in place for a while now, but the leaders board, the new version of that, has only been in for about a year or so. And they have a way of presenting their meetings where they do a public session, like we're in public at the moment, until we decide that the public be excluded. So we could carry that on under the new arrangements. So I'll open it up for any sort of questions or comments at this stage from any members of the committee. Joe.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to offer you my full support for this on behalf of Staffordshire Moorlands. I think this would save a lot of time. I think it would make absolute sense, as you and I know from being the Chair and Vice Chair of the Sustainability Board. I think this would make absolute sense because the Waste Board and the Sustainability Board, we've both got the same agendas. We want to make Staffordshire sustainable. Obviously, we want to cut carbon emissions. It makes absolute sense to have the two meetings working together in one meeting rather than having separate. Obviously, there may be some issues around practicalities with which officers to send, but obviously that's something we can sort out depending on what's exactly on the agenda for that meeting. And, you know, as many of us in the room know, Cabinet members can do the exact same. So I think it would make absolute sense, and it would cut down on the number of meetings we would have to have.
Thank you for that, Joe. Mark, and then Steve.
We have a situation where the microphones work. Obviously, apologies for this. I'm the newbie on this this board, on the Joint Waste Board, and I understand that Jonathan Price is the cabinet member that does the Sustainability Board, which sort of brings me to the question: as if you merge both boards. And I can see the sense on that side in terms of saving officer time. Will you actually cause a problem where, not a problem, but an increase in officer time? Because there will be officers sat through some items, such as the gates on waste and such like, which aren't sustainable. And then on the sustainable side, there'll be items that members will be sat on that aren't, honestly, it doesn't actually affect them. So while I see the sense in it, I do think it's a fairly cumbersome animal that's been put together. And I'd like to see a bit more meat on the bones about how you split the two bits off occasionally. So do we have an agenda that's got a sustainability bit on and a joint waste bit on, so that people who aren't affected know not to come? And I see what Simon's saying as well, that it should feed back into the leaders and the chief execs. But as I say, just take an example of the 4 ashes, the hot water that comes from that currently I understand is still being wasted, and it was supposed to go to the prison. How would something like that fit across the two portfolios? So it's an interesting one, but as I say, I'm not wholly convinced that it's the right decision. But on that point, I'm going to pass over to Leaf to see the officer's opinion on it.
Yeah, thank you. The point for Stafford Borough Council is that we have a separate officer and a separate portfolio holder for sustainability and for waste. So regarding the idea that this will help with efficiency, it may not quite be the case for all of us if there are other authorities in the same boat, because as Councillor Whittington has alluded to, we would potentially have members and officers sitting through agenda items that weren't particularly pertinent to their work areas.
Yeah, I mean, to respond to that, I think, as I said, the sort of the sequencing of the agenda could actually help with that, because if we do the waste business first, because we're basically in a single meeting for a lot of us at the moment, because we will be staying behind after this meeting to go into the Sustainability Board. And what we have had a few times is we've had people waiting outside for the Waste Management Board to end before the Sustainability Board could get going. So actually, you might as well just have them in the room, as and when they want to be in the room. But I think the possibility of sequencing the agenda so that, for example, where there is a portfolio holder for waste, when that waste bit is done on the agenda, he or she could leave, or they could stay, because of, as I say, the Sustainability Board has waste as one of its key priorities. So I think we're already getting a joining up of this already. And I think for efficiency for most districts would be that they have one portfolio holder. Where we don't have that, there's a way of sequencing so that one can come in and one can leave, or they could stay if they're interested in the entire agenda. I don't think there's any problem with that. Mark?
Just off the top of my head, while you were talking then, will the memorandum of understanding, whatever the articles of the meeting, allow me as waste to speak on sustainability issues and vice versa? That's another interesting one for you.
Yeah, because one of our base pledges, which we all took through cabinets, one of them is about waste management and getting to waste zero, etc. So that's the same agenda. So I think if the portfolio holder for waste wishes to take part in the sustainability part of the agenda, that is fine, because they have a responsibility through their portfolios. Though in the districts where there is a separation of those, which I understand is up to each district, and we're not trying to say you must have the same portfolio holder at all. It just works differently in different councils, and we accept that. But I think, as your officer said, the key thing is that we've got the officer groups that work below the board or boards that stay separate and concentrate on their business, because that's where the business of the committee comes from. It comes from the officer groups working below, that we can then give a view, pursue an item, either to cabinets at each district individually or through the leaders board. So I think there's a mechanism. But Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Simon. It seems a totally common sense solution. It reminds me back at Newcastle, we used to have a licensing committee, and we used to have a public protection committee, and now we've got a licensing and public protection committee, and that works absolutely fine. The agenda splits halfway through, and he carries on, and it's just such a logical thing to do. I can't really see the point in discussing it, to be honest with you. It's black and white to me. Thank you.
Looking at other members, Ray, anything to say? Len, even. Ray's on his computer. Len, anything to add?
It's a good idea to combine the two.
Sorry, Simon, I was on mute. After having a dual responsibility with Councillor Peters, We now have a combined responsibility under myself for waste management and sustainability. I did see the issues that Mark identified, but as you quite rightly point out, if you actually stage the agenda so that waste management has all their agenda items, sustainability, it doesn't hamper anything. In fact, as you say, it helps the understanding of both boards. So I've got no problem with it, as long as we manage to maintain separate agendas and don't actually clog them up.
Thank you, Ray. And sorry, Len, over to you.
I'll try again. I'd certainly be in favour of bringing the two together. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking at other elected members, I think we've got from Lichfield, I believe, Elizabeth. Is it Elizabeth?
Yeah, fine, okay with me. I do liaise directly with the cabinet member at Lichfield, who's Councillor Angela Lax, and we have obviously discussed that the two boards are trying to achieve the same objective. So for me, it makes complete sense to have the two together, and I think we'd both be interested in seeing what each part is up to as well. So yeah, fine with me.
Okay, thank you. And our I've forgotten your name now. Tamworth member, who was it? Sorry, Stephen Doyle. Apologies, Stephen.
I don't see any. Oops, sorry. I don't see any problem with it. I'm in favour of joining the meetings. Okay,
thank you. So it seems to be we have, but we might as well take a vote on it then, I think, or if people feel that's appropriate. Yeah. So we can move the item on. All those from elected members, all those in favour of obviously joining the boards together, probably from our next meeting, even though he does say in the report we will go back to the leaders board ultimately for get their sign off because they create these two committees we're on anyway. All in favour?
Simon,
sorry.
Before we do that, can we sort of nail down this, that there'd be two lots of agenda items so that's, if that's it, I'm happy with it.
Yep, certainly so. There'll be two parts of the agenda based on waste management and then based on the sustainability. And when there's any crossovers, obviously that will for Stafford, for example, and for those others who've got dual members, would involve both. Okay, thank you. So all in favour of the proposal to bring the boards together? And we got a couple of hands online there. So that's more or less unanimous, I think. Okay, from the members that are here. Okay, so we'll do that. We'll action that. We'll go back to the leaders board as well and get their final sign-off. Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Just one other quick question. Are we going to call the two boards joined together the Sustainability Board or the Sustainability and Waste Board? Like, what's the official name going to be? And also, what are we going to do about the Chair and Vice Chair situation too?
Name, I'm not really, suggestions please. We've got Sustainability Board or the Waste and Sustainability Board, or Sustainability Board because waste comes under one of our priorities. So I think if we can go away and have a look at that and then obviously do a bit of sort of feedback to members and ask their views when we've thought of that. And as for the Chair and Vice Chair, currently I chair both. We don't have a Vice Chair of Waste Management Board, but you chair the Sustainability Board. So I think in our next meeting is really to confirm that and see if that's what's acceptable to the joint board, and also a name. I think we should get hung upon names, but we also need to ensure that we do take on board what has been said about the waste part of this is a big part of what we're trying to do in our sustainability agenda as well, isn't it? So, okay, thank you for that, Joe. We'll move then to the items before us in this public part of the meeting. The first one is a summary progress report from the SWOG Chair, who's sitting next to me. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Do we have the data to display? No. If you've got your agenda pack in front of you, you'll see the recycling data from Q1 of this year compared to the last couple of years' data. One of the key trends to point out is we've seen a significant reduction in residual waste across the board on average. And we're still seeing a fairly consistent pattern to recycling, composting and reuse. What this is leading to potentially is a little bit of fluctuation to our recycling rate. As our residual drops down, we may start seeing the recycling, if it stays stable in terms of a rate, increasing slightly. One of the factors we think is influencing this is the sort of post-COVID bubble, where people are returning to work, not throwing away as much at home. And one of the other factors is very likely the cost of living crisis. People are buying less, throwing less away, making more conscious decisions with their money. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the table we're looking at, if you printed it out, it'll be quite small, but if you can see it on the, it was sent, I think, after the main agenda, wasn't it, Liam? I think, as a late one. So those members that haven't got that, it does point out all of the performance of the districts relating to the various waste streams that they collect. And as has been obviously pointed out by our officer there, I'll open that up for any sort of questions or comments. Not seeing any. Okay, thank you for that report. Next one is the update from the conference, and we're going to bring in, I think, Andrew Bird, who's going to speak on this and he's online. Let's hope the technology works.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me? Okay.
That's great. Thanks, Andrew.
So, lovely. Okay. Yeah, so we had the Lowett conference last week, which very kindly gave me COVID, which is why I'm not with you in person today, but we'll skip past that. Effectively, yeah, interesting. Conferences are always interesting, but I suppose we went into it hoping that we'd get some sort of firm update from DEFRA, ever hopeful. Not necessarily did we receive that, but there was a general assurance that certainly by the end of this calendar year, we will see the outcome of the consultations for consistency and deposit return schemes, DRS. So that was the sort of clearest indication yet of a date. However, we've sort of been here before, so we'll have to see on that one. But they seemed relatively confident. What we did receive off DEFRA, which was really helpful, was a lot more detail in terms of the payment mechanisms for extended producer responsibility and how we as local authorities will get paid. And effectively the data that will be necessary to be able to make those payments. Now we all operate something or have to complete something called waste data flow at the moment. That is going to be revised going forward, and it is all about data. Local authorities themselves won't necessarily get, and I think I've probably stated this before, won't necessarily just get their costs covered. So it won't be a case of us, us at Newcastle saying, yes, our recycling service costs £1.5 million. Thank you very much. We'll have that from you. It will be, the payments will be based on a modelled scenario around between 9 and 12 different models that exist that take account of local authority size, rurality, all of the usual types of things. So we could be in the situation where you could have the situation where there could be some losers and there could be some winners. So we'll just have to see and keep a close eye on that as a partnership on how that moves forward. I think the idea is that as things move forward, the data will get more accurate and actually costs will be properly covered. But certainly in the first year or so, it's probably going to be not quite so straightforward. I think also the bit that we don't do an awful lot on at the moment is around the analysis of the compositional analysis of materials, both in terms of dry recycling, which we've got fairly good data on, but residual waste as well, because clearly producers are going to have to pay for packaging waste that exists within the residual waste stream. And whilst there's various analysis done at the 2 energy from waste plants, it'll be a case of whether that's sufficient. So again, want to keep an eye on this. This area of data is becoming more and more complex. And then the third one is around litter. So we will be getting paid for packaging litter that is in litter bins, not ground litter in England. Although that is the case in the devolved governments, Scotland and Wales. Northern Ireland is just litter bins as well. But again, there is very little data on how much packaging waste actually is it within our litter bin collection stream. So that again is one that that's going to need a lot of work. Probably more worryingly was that there was a comment made as well that this, in terms of the current spending review for local authorities, the addition of EPR payments won't affect those. But it was stated in a roundabout way that future spending reviews will take account of EPR. So it very much looks like we'll be given money on one hand and Treasury will be taking it away in another. Not necessarily a surprise, in all honesty, I have to say. But again, it's one that as a group we need to keep a very close eye on. So that was really the sort of DEFRA side of things. I think the other one is that there's very much, and I know that we have either sent or are about to send a letter again into DEFRA to outline our concerns over the delays. But there was an awful lot of talk about the delays now having a real effect on supply chains. So procurement of vehicles, bins, caddies, you name it, is going to be very, very seriously affected. And it is unlikely that some of the timeframes that government initially set out will be met now, basically because of delays in procurement. So not a lack of willingness by local authorities to implement new services, but actually a lack of resources to be able to do it, as I say, in terms of vehicles and bins. So that again is a concern. And I suppose what I've taken away from that is that maybe as an as a partnership and as a board, there's certain things that we do know that are coming, and maybe we need to be a little bit smarter in terms of saying, are the things that we can really do now need to start to get on board with. And I'm thinking mainly probably around food waste. Doesn't affect my own authority because we already are compliant and collect it separately. But we've spoken before about what we need to do in terms of that, and the other district or other collection authorities needing to undertake it. So I think there's various things now as an officer group we need to really start to take forward, and whether that's to start developing parts of the joint municipal waste strategy or not, I think is a decision we need to take. But if we don't, we run the danger of being caught up with everybody else in lengthy procurement and lack of supply of goods and indeed services. I think Tim and Josh were at the conference. Well, I know they were at the conference as well, so I'm not sure whether they've got any more they wish to add. But other than that, that's my update, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And sorry that you came back with COVID, but you seem to be on the mend now, so I hope that happens as soon as possible. Any other officers who were at the conference want to make any comments? Tim?
No, it was just, I think Andrew's summary pretty much captures everything of the conference, and from my point, I think I agree with him. We need to sort of start forging ahead in certain areas now, because if we wait, we will be caught up with everybody else. I think Staffordshire and Newcastle are already working together on food waste procurement, and it's probably something we need to start looking at in terms of our strategy. What do we do and how do we make it flexible enough to respond to the future when the resource and waste strategy comes out?
And you had a bit of a cough there as well. You haven't caught it as well, have you?
No, I haven't. I've tested negative.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, so there's obviously a clear sort of steer from our officers there that even though we're in the flux of a new government at the moment and things are changing, you know, by the week or day even on some of the policies of the government, we do have a trajectory on these policies, don't we? We already know about. Maybe take longer to come in, or they may take a while to review them. But there's a direction, particularly on food waste, which we are aware of, which we're travelling in. So our members can tempt that our officers through the SWAB group begin to sort of scope out some of that. So we are, as Andrew said, ahead of the game some respects when all councils do begin to start to move in the direction, and as he said, there'll be a lot of people trying to go for the same things and contracts, etc., as that we begin to scope that out. Open it up to members for any comments. Not seeing any. Okay, so we'll ask SWAG to do that then, if that's okay, and then we can be, as Andrew said, get ahead of the game. Thank you to Andrew and Tim for the comments. We'll move on then to item 7, which is the date and venue of next meeting. We've got the 16th of January as our next meeting, and we've got the council chamber here. I think we can keep that date, but we may review whether we need to hold that in person or online. I think let's have a look at that near the time, and also take into account what the meeting schedule is for the Sustainability Board, which we are due to join together with. So if everybody's happy with that. Okay, thank you. Item 8 is exclusion of the public. I, as Chairman, move that the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business which are likely disclosure of exempt information as defined by paragraph 1A, schedule 12A, as amended of the Local Government Act 1972. All agreed to exclude the public? Members? Yes, okay. So we will now end the webcast.